Going into round 8 of the Batumi Chess Olympiad, 3 teams share the lead. Poland, Azerbaijan and the USA. Poland played Armenia. Tight match, all 4 games drawn. What about Azerbaijan against the USA? Well, this was a tremendous match. Hikaru Nakamura played against Arkady Naiditch. That was a very close game, ended in a draw. Then we had Temur Radyabov for Azerbaijan, who defeated Wesley So in a very nice game. Outplayed Wesley, who, well, up to now has been on tremendous form, but he met his match. So that left 2 games going with the USA down 1 point. Could they come back? I look at both those games in 2 separate videos. First of all, the top board encounter between Fabiano Caruana with white against Shahriar Mamedyarov, number 2 and 3 in the world. Now, we joined the game after 33 moves. I'm not going to go through the whole game because it's a very long encounter. I should just say it was an open Spanish, very theoretical. I'm sure you can find the game if you want to on various websites if you want to look up the whole thing. But we joined the game at really a point where the game has settled down. It's clear that white is better here. I think you could say only 2 results are possible under normal circumstances. Either white will win or it's going to be a draw. You can see that the queen is in an excellent position here. If black were to trade into a rook and pawn endgame, you can see white is obviously better here, hitting 2 pawns. And it's a slight problem for black that this f-pawn has advanced, because that weakens the 7th rank, and that has a bearing not only in rook and pawn endgames, where the king can be cut off, but also in queen and rook positions where the black king can come under fire. On the other hand, that pawn on f2 gives white's king much better protection, so that's an important positional point. And you can see black's queenside pawns are a little bit vulnerable. White definitely has the advantage here. And it's hard for black to kind of completely settle things down in this position. I mean, one option might be to give away that f-pawn, head for a rook and pawn endgame, and simplify him. And this is one very legitimate option. So you can see that white is a pawn ahead, not a particularly good pawn. Nevertheless, that's a wonderful rook here that can always hassle black's king, can keep an eye on this pawn, keeps an eye on this pawn, and then white can slowly advance on the king side with pawns and king. Of course, black has drawing chances in this position, but can he hold out? Very tricky. So that's the kind of decision that Mamedyarov has to make in this position, and it's never easy to determine which is the safest option, because your opponent can always keep making progress. Well, he decided to do something about that pawn here and played c4. So that's exchanged off, but of course the pawn is isolated, as is the pawn on a6. I know there's a target for black here, but still white's pawns somehow look better placed than black's queenside pawns. So queen b7 from Caruana, and that has the obvious idea to plant the rook on d7. It's one possibility, but also looks at the pawn on a6. So therefore rook e7, a check. And if the rook goes back, well, rook d7 is possible, but actually you could in fact exchange and play queen here, and that is going to win a pawn. So therefore king f7. Well, you can see straight away how black's king is simply less secure than white's here. It's relying on the protection of the queen and rook rather than relying on the protection of pawns. And that is dangerous, because that means that these major pieces are going to be stretched. Are they defending pawns? Are they defending the king? Well, they're trying to do both, and that's not easy. So the queen comes back, so starts to hassle black's king from the other side of the board. And that queen also lends white's king some protection. So therefore g6, but this certainly doesn't solve black's problems. And now the queen just nudges forward, and that's a nice move. Perhaps looking at queen h6, perhaps looking to bring the rook back to d6. And remember, if there's a check down here, then the king just steps up to h2 and is safe. So that queen does a very good job of protecting the important f2 square as well. So queen c6, threatening check and mate. So therefore the rook comes back. No panic, guarding the first rank, because white still has attacking options here, namely that h pawn. So just watch out for this typical advance. So for example, if king g7 preventing queen h6, then let's give a check and we can nudge that one up again. Is it going to exchange on g6? Is it going to advance again and set up a mating net? Does black really want to take here and open up the king? And very difficult position for black to defend. Rook e4 played, queen h6, the queen goes in, and now, well, check is no good because the rook will come back, but h5. So the pressure is on. Rook e8 defends the first rank. Pawns exchanged. I mean, queen takes is possible, but the queen would white's queen would go back. And here's a very interesting move, and I think a really classy move from Caruana. Not an obvious move at all. King f1. So what's that about? Well, sometimes it just simply gives white the option to bring this rook down the board without having to worry about rook e1. Now, I mean, this is very subtle indeed, because it's not possible straight away, but we'll see in a few moves' time that this is very important. But yeah, not an obvious move by any means. Rook e6. At the moment, black can only wait. Queen h4. And now rook d4. The rook comes up the board. So the queen and the rook have lined up on the fourth rank to attack the pawn on c4. So, you know, white very cleverly switching attacks. First the king, then this pawn on c4. Now here, again, a very difficult moment for the defender. Do you defend your weaknesses, or do you just ditch the pawn? Well, you know, it's possible just to ditch that pawn, but obviously that is an admission that things have gone absolutely horribly wrong. Instead, Mamedyarov plays somehow the most natural move, bringing the rook over to defend that pawn. But with the rook away from the central file, that means that black's counterplay is going to be even more limited and gives white an even freer hand to attack black's king. So queen h6 and rook d4. I mean, you can see straight away that without the rook on the e file, then simply there is no attack, no counter attack down the e file to the king. So now obviously black's king is in massive trouble. Threat queen h8 followed by rook down to h7. So the king has to step up, and it looks for security behind these pawns. Much better to have pawns here where for example, where white's king can't be hassled round the back of the position, but you can see it's this rank here that gives white an extra attacking option. This is the problem. And now, having driven the king up the board, this is really nice. The rook switches back in order to potentially attack down here, but also giving the queen some room to attack here. It's fascinating stuff. Queen back. Obviously, Caruana declines the queen exchange. And now queen d2. I really like the way that he's switching back and forth. He has such freedom here. Threat rook d7. So that's defended against. And now the rook hits the h-file. Threatening here. And the queen centralizes. A check. Queen's got a step in the way. And now the queen ducks here. A check. And comes to the back rank. And now this looks pretty nasty. King comes here. A check. And now it would be very surprising if black survives this position. But this still requires some accuracy. Of course, it's certainly not worth taking that pawn on c4. That would be small beer compared to going after the king. But you can see how in defending that pawn, black's rook has basically just been sidelined. Also, it doesn't help that that rook has no support. It's not protected by a pawn, whereas white's rook, solid protection. Loose pieces drop off. This is the problem. There's simply more for black to worry about. Rook d8. Things are getting nasty. So obviously a check threatened, driving the king up the board, potentially into the e-file where there'll be a deadly pin. So the king kind of jumps before it's pushed. f4 check. Now, Mamedyarov has a chance to be as brave as a tiger, as brave as Tiger Hill-Up-Pearson. I hope many of you have watched that video I recorded of Tiger Hill-Up-Pearson's game, I should say, in the previous round, where he won with an absolutely splendid king march. Excuse me, I'm getting very excited about this. So can he be as courageous as a tiger and come into f3 to try and checkmate? Not in this case, I'm afraid. The tiger's roar would be hollow after rook d2. And I'm afraid the king just gets caught here. There's no defense to, well, checking on f2 and rook e2. I'm afraid it's gone. So king h5 and rook d2 anyway. And rook check. The king is caught in a net. And king g2, very nice. So if queen takes queen, then we have rook h4 mate. Wonderful stuff. So only move g5 to stop rook h4 mate. And now, again, another beautiful move to finish. It's just so incisive. Threatening queen h5 mate, as well as queen e2. And of course, there is no defense there. That was a sensational game from Fabiano Caruana. He played so beautifully, and he is obviously on tremendous form. I can imagine Magnus Carlsen looking at this game and thinking, okay, that is impressive. And that win brings Fabiano Caruana's live rating to within 4.5 points of Magnus Carlsen. Carlsen 28.39 on the live list. Caruana 28.34.5. Fascinating stuff. The heat is on. Now, that's meant that the scores in the USA-Azerbaijan match were 1.5 each, with just one game to go. That was Mamedyarov against Shankland. If you want to know what's happened in that game, then do check out the link above, where I'll be going through that game. And it was another classic. Thanks for watching.